Interesting insight this week from passing game coordinator Kyle Richardson. He says Clemson's offense needs to get confident and healthy players to be successful in 2022. And he goes into what he means by those things. I think we can understand on our end what it means by being healthy, but we'll talk about what he meant by being confident. Hey, before we do, make sure you like this video and you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on all of our exclusive Clemson content we put out every single week. All right, so talking about being confident and healthy. Going on the healthy part, we know that it's difficult for an offense to do anything when you've got wide receivers out, starters out, running backs out, offensive line just, switching in and out. Everybody's injured. People that you thought were going to be there, not there. And that's really what happened for the 2021 season for the Tigers on all fronts, really. So it wasn't a good year for Tigers in terms of injuries. What can they do to improve that? Well, you just got to get healthy. You've got to do those things to get those surgeries done, do those rehabs, and, take care of your body. For some of the players, it's been eating better and, practicing their flexibility more than they were last year. But a lot of times it is those serious injuries where you just have to give it time. And so there's not much you can do as a coach to get players healthy, especially when it requires surgery and things like that. But what you can really help with is that confidence. And Kyle Richardson, the passing game coordinator for Clemson, a new coach that has entered in, even though he's not new to the team, has some feedback or has told the media this week what he means by that. So let's take a look at it. He talks about some tweaks on the offense. So I'll read a quote here for you. It's one of those situations where if you look at the big picture, I've been here for 6 years, and you go, okay, we've done some great things in the passing game. As a coach, you can't just zoom in on last year. The flip side of that is you can't just assume we'll be better next year because of X, Y, and Z and not change anything. Obviously, my background is passing, and that's where Coach Sweeney has challenged us to get it back to where we were. I think that'll come with some healthy guys, but we also have to get our confidence back in the passing game. We lost it last year, and once we lost it, it was hard to get back. So he goes ahead and admits, hey, they lost their confidence in the passing game. And you look back at last year, and it really was an outlier. I talked about it many times. In Dabo Sweeney's tenure as a head coach at Clemson, he's never had an offense perform that bad, that poorly. And really, when you look at it, okay, it could be an outlier, it could be just a one-time thing. There were so many things that went wrong that maybe that's just, you chalk it up as a random coincidence, happening of events that all the stars align, and hopefully, likely, probably it won't happen again. But that's not really a good way to view things if you're trying to improve. You always want to learn from situations in the past, even though they may never happen again. And I think that Coach Richardson is saying the right things in this case, because you want to try to find out ways to get better and look back at what did you do, what are some tweaks that you can do. And he talks about those tweaks. He goes on to say, we've made some tweaks. I think the biggest thing as a coach was Coach Streeter and I sitting down and talking about where do we want to go in the future with this? Do we want to throw it all out the window? He says, we don't want to throw it all out the window, but we want to grow. So again, it's why Dabo Sweeney hired these guys as coaches. Dabo Sweeney himself doesn't want to throw it all out the window. I do feel like that Clemson has a good foundation of success on the offense, and they've shown over the past years that they can be successful and rotate through quarterbacks. A lot of people say, oh, well, it's just great quarterbacks. Not really. I mean, they've had many different quarterbacks, and they've all been able to be successful, and DJ has also been successful, but obviously last year was not. So what can they tweak to help him out and help the rest of the offense out? And he gets into that, and he says there's two things. And I quote, let's get back to the basics. Number one, which was let's put the ball in Playmaker's hands in space, and they went and made plays. And number two, maybe we need to simplify things. Maybe some things stacked on each other year after year, and all of a sudden, simple things became complicated. Those are probably the two biggest things we've looked at to get our confidence back. Now, when I look at this, I think, okay, these are two good points. You've got get the ball in the playmaker's hands. Well, I mean, you really want to do that all the time. I mean, every team wants to do that. If you're not doing that, then that is a concern. I think about when we look back at the third and Renfro, everybody knew the ball was going to Hunter Renfro. Third down, sometimes everybody knew that when Hunter Renfro wasn't there, it was going to be Amari Rodgers. So you knew that those guys were going to get the ball, just like you know LeBron James is going to get the ball. But at the end of the day, can you stop that player? And I think looking back at last year, there were a lot of times after the games or at least before the games, that the previous coaching staff would say the same things. They would say, we need to simplify things. We need to get the ball in the playmaker's hands. But then after the games, maybe after a loss or a tough win, it would be, well, we just had to take what the defense gave us. We really couldn't do much more than this or that. And I hate that. I hated that. As a fan, I've never been a coach, but when I think about it, I think if you're an elite team and you are overmatched and you have overmatched this team even when you're injured, there needs to be a healthy dose of try and beat me. I dare you to do this. I dare you to stop me. There were a lot of times last year where we saw, oh, well, they had 5 deep, they had 4 deep, they had 15 deep. We couldn't do it. No. Try and stop me. I'm going to throw the ball deep anyways. You try and beat my best wide receiver and my best quarterback. Try. And I think sometimes maybe that would actually work out. Now, maybe it would be an interception. Who knows? But you got to test. You got to say, hey, we're not just going to take what you give us. We're going to take what we want out of this possession. And just having that aggressiveness and just mode of attack constantly and not so much, well, you know, we gotta keep. They kept the ball in front of them. We couldn't go over their heads and all this stuff. I get it to a certain percentage. So the first thing is get the ball in the playmaker's hands. Well, it all goes back to being healthy too. You can't have guys on the bench that are supposed to be your playmakers. And as a coach, it's hard to really manage that. But if they're not there, they're not there. But again, the ones that are there, you can get them the ball for sure. The second thing he said is simplify things. And we heard that last year, simplify things. I think more of it was on simplifying things for DJ because it seemed like everything was just going too fast for him. But he also mentioned things had stacked and got overcomplicated over time. And I think that might be a key point of why longevity as a coach in college football is maybe a negative thing after a while. To a certain point, longevity is not a good thing. Now, longevity in recruiting is a great thing. Longevity in play calling may not be a great thing, specifically for that team and your opponents that you're constantly playing that understand how you manage a game. You're going to have tendencies because we're all human beings. So after a certain amount of time, your opponents know what's coming and can adjust and will adjust and be prepared even better the next year and the next year and the next year. But I also think about when you're talking about compounding things on and building the playbook and growing the playbook, if you had success with Taj Boyd and you grew it from there, and then you had success with Deshaun Watson and you grew it from there, and you had success with Kelly Bryant, you grew it from there, and then you had success with Trevor Lawrence and you grew it from there, then I can see where someone like DJ might get in and be like, this is kind of overwhelming. This is a little bit too complicated. I wasn't here 10 years ago, so I don't remember when it was originally installed. So some of those things may be going back to the basics and saying, hey, I think that's the joy of college football. You don't have the same players after 4 years, sometimes after 3 years, sometimes, hey, even with the transfer portal now, you don't have the player for 2 or 1 year anymore. So I think there has to be a point of realization that, maybe we need to start over. I think back to my daughter's softball team. There are players that have been there for 3 years, that have played softball since they were in T-ball, that are really good, that can hit the ball, they understand the game, and they're leaders on the team as far as their athletic ability. But then there's the other half of the team that is just trying to figure out where first base is. And sometimes you have to realize that as a coach and say, okay, I'm not saying that Clemson's players aren't mentally capable or they're not high IQ guys. I'm sure they are because they're enrolled at Clemson. But I also feel like that there is some looking back and assessing where your players are mentally and where they need to grow as far as the playbook goes. You can't assume in a world, in a league where you're losing players left and right more than any other league, really even more than the professional. That's why I hate the transfer portal. you can't assume that they're going to retain things that the previous team did. So looking back at that as well. Another thing he goes in to talk about the even more specifics, which is something that I think a lot of fans will be excited about hearing, is the post-snap concepts, right? So, quote, he says, and what I want to do post-snap, where are some grass pockets in this play call and how we can get into those? Where are some grass pockets in this play call and how we can get into those? How can we get more answers post-snap? Because nowadays, you can't just look at the sideline and get out of this bad play call. Because as soon as you get a new play, well, the defense also gets a new defense. And you run out of time to snap the ball. So for me, it's like, how can we take advantage of what the defense gives us post-snap and have it already built in? Those are some things we've really looked at hard at our core concepts. As we've tweaked our core concepts, it really doesn't add anything. We're going to run the same routes, but as you run the route, there's a question mark. I give the tight ends a route to run, and I tell them they've got an exclamation point at the end. When they're running that route, no questions asked. If there's a question mark, then they're running that route. They can think about some things and maybe do something different based on what the defender is doing to me. So really, to me, that is, if you just break it down, is option concept, which is very basic. I mean, you see that in Madden. You have where a player will run a route, and based on where the where the defense is lined up, maybe they're deep, maybe they're tight, man coverage, pressing on them, maybe they're to the inside, maybe they're to the outside. Wherever that defender is lined up, you then decide, okay, I'm going to adjust and do something different. Now, you also have an opportunity not to just think about it and compartmentalize it with you versus that person in front of you. But there are times where there are zone defenses called against you and not man defenses. And there are times where you have to kind of open up and look at your surroundings and pay attention and say, okay, this is what I need to do in this scenario. I'm seeing the play develop as I'm running this route, and I need to go this way instead of that way. Now, it's very difficult because you see the quarterback also has to be understanding of that play. Typically, you don't have more than one route doing that. What I've seen is you have one player that does that, a key player that you want to have do kind of an option route where they have a choice of where they go. Because if you allow every single player to do that, then the quarterback cannot manage that at all. So you want to have one player, a key player, and it changes each play, but at least one player where they're allowed to make a decision based on the defense. And typically it's the one that you trust the most, Amari Rodgers, your Hunter Renfrow. As you remember, Hunter Renfrow, there are a lot of plays that probably was not the route he was supposed to run. And that's not the way it was designed, but because of the connection between Deshaun, because of the connection between Trevor, he was able to run those routes and be successful. And even now in the NFL, you can see him run routes, and it's like, there's no way that was the way it looked on paper. But he did it, and he was able to make a choice based on the things he saw in front of him. And for you to have an elite offense, that has to be a core concept. And it's a little puzzling that wasn't already in. He didn't say that wasn't already in, but I'm not sure how much that was already in. Maybe that was a limitation based on last year's staff, but maybe it was a limitation based on the capacity for the team that was there. When you don't have the same players on the field constantly, going back to the healthy part of it, you really can't have those, naturally built things that develop. I look back at when DJ was the best and the most successful, the Boston College game, the Notre Dame game. What was he able to rely on? He was able to rely on Travis Etienne getting open in space, even when that wasn't necessarily his call. And Dabo mentioned this in his post-practice stuff about how they needed to stop having the running backs. If the running back was called a block and is supposed to block, but they don't bring enough players for the running back to block anybody, then the running back should not just stand there and wait and do nothing and just, look pretty. The running back should say, hey, based on the environment, the atmosphere, the situation that I'm in, there is no one here to block. I need to now look at the open grass, the open spaces, and decide I need to get open. Now, they did that better as the season went on last year, but this needs to be something that is a a core concept for them, getting into space. Now you look back, Travis Etienne did that amazingly. He was a beautiful at that. I look forward to seeing what he can do in the NFL with it. I know he's been injured. I think he's going to be great with it in the NFL because he has Trevor Lawrence who can trust him to do that. When you get a quarterback and a running back that can trust each other to one to get open in space and another one to throw it to them, even when it really wasn't what was on paper, that's when you can make things special. That's when you can really put the defense on their heels because you're not limited to the play that you saw when you looked at the sideline. So again, it seems simple, it seems basic, but these are things that, looking back, maybe they can do better with and improve going into next season. I think it's exciting as a Clemson fan to get any kind of like peek behind the curtain because normally you just get the same old stuff from practice, but it's good to see some of this information. Now, again, he keeps going even further into some of the tweaks and changes that he's done or that they're looking to do. And one of the things I thought was interesting and kind of, again, concerning from the past, but interesting going forward is he says, we looked at a few older concepts that we install and practice, but they aren't great play calls in the game, so we never call them in the games. So let's quit installing them and wasting the reps on them in practice. Now that to me was definitely a head scratcher because I'm like, over the years, I don't really understand why you would install things just to install them and then never use them in situations, even in a one-off situation. I think that everything should have a purpose. It goes back to what do you demand of your players? You demand of your players, Brent Venables did this, Mike Reed does this, everybody does this on the offense, Dabo Swinney does this with the wide receivers. You demand that they minimize the amount of wasted steps. As a wide receiver, when you blast off the snap, you do not want to waste your steps because every step wasted is a delay in the alignment with the quarterback, and so it could throw off your timing. Any wasted step could also cause you in a man-to-man coverage or in a press coverage to not gain the separation that you need. So wasted steps are to be avoided at all costs. Not just on the offense, though, but on the defense as well. Brent Venables just pounded this into his linebackers and took Clemson's linebacking core from average to below average to best in the nation. And he did that by instilling in them the simple concept of not wasting your steps. You're going to be able to cover your player in space better if you align properly pre-snap, which we know that was an issue in Ohio State. I get you. But when after the ball is snapped, minimizing your wasted steps, and that is key for really any position. And if you're going to minimize wasted steps and demand that of your players, on the flip side, as a coach, you have to minimize wasted concepts, wasted play calls, wasted repetitions on plays that you're never going to use. Now, I get it. Again, I get it. You want to have, unique plays. You want to have things that are installed that are kind of one-off things, maybe some trick plays here and there. There are situational things that you do, but when the playbook gets as large as the Cheesecake Factory menu, maybe you need to take it back a little bit and say, hey, again, it goes back to, at the end of the day, can I throw a deep ball and beat this guy? Can my playmaker beat their playmaker? Can my team beat the person in front of them? I see this with the blocking schemes and everything. Why overcomplicate it? Why pull this guy and that guy and have them cross and high five and do a dap and then do-si-do and then block the guy this way and that way? Just block the guy in front of you sometimes. Sometimes. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes it's just the guy in front of you beating them. And again, sometimes it's just, hey, I'm going to call this play, and this is a play that's our bread and butter play, and you try to beat us, and let's go from there. And again, it goes back to not wasting those plays because your reps in practice, you don't get much time with these players, so they have to be super confident in the plays that you are going to call and not, opening their minds up and complicating things to where they have to think on, 16 different possibilities every single play. That's just not good for sure. And closing out, he talks about, again, the health of the team being most important, but he also talks about he's seeing glimpses of success. So he's had some practices this spring where they create big plays, and it's like, wow, we're really going to be an explosive offense this season. But then he has some practices where he says, what's the deal? We're growing, and we're still growing as an offensive staff. We're still growing these kids. So again, I think if you go into the spring game this year and you get to watch it, understand that the offense and the staff and the players are still growing. They're still learning each other and still developing their identity and growing into that. But also at the other end, you might see some plays where you're like, wow, this is what I'm expecting with the new staff. So again, really insightful stuff from Kyle Richardson, the passing game coordinator from Clemson, about the offense and the tweaks that they're going to be making and the challenges that they have coming up. I really enjoyed these comments from him. Let me know what you think in the comments and tell me, did I miss anything? Am I completely off? Or what do you think about Kyle Richardson's comments? And don't forget to subscribe and like the YouTube channel and this video.